My own son left me in a nursing home on my birthday. A week later, I won the lottery. Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. On my 62nd birthday, I thought I was going out for lunch. I put on my best sweater and even did my hair. But instead of cake and laughter, I was handed a suitcase and abandoned. That was just the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it carries your last name. Stay until the end and tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. They say a mother's love is unconditional, that it is patient, forgiving, and eternal. I believe that. I lived it. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every school play, I was there for Brandon, my only son. I woke up on my birthday with a flutter in my chest, that familiar warmth of anticipation. 62 years old, alone in my modest house in Dayton, Ohio, but hopeful. Brandon hadn't called much lately. He said work was hectic, that things with his wife were tense. But surely he would show up today. I made pancakes, his favorite. I even set 2 plates. By noon, I was still alone. My heart sank a little, but I refused to fall apart. I checked my phone a dozen times, reread old messages just to feel some kind of connection. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Brandon standing there with that boyish smile he used to wear whenever he wanted something. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, holding a small bouquet from the supermarket. I smiled through the pain in my chest and hugged him tightly. "You came." "Of course," he said, patting my back stiffly. "Get dressed. I made lunch reservations." I didn't even question it. I grabbed my coat, a small purse, and put on the shoes that always pinched my toes but looked good. I felt excited, like a girl going to prom. But we didn't drive into town or toward any restaurant. We pulled into a place with a long driveway lined with maple trees, their leaves turned ashy gold and red. I looked at the sign and felt my stomach twist. Willow Pines Senior Living Facility. "Brandon, what is this?" He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't safe anymore. You live alone, and with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I cut in sharply. He kept talking. "I found a great place. It's safe, comfortable. You'll have people your age. Activities." I laughed. The kind of bitter laugh that doesn't feel like laughing at all. "You're joking. You brought me here, on my birthday?" He got out of the car. "Let's go inside." I refused to move. That's when he opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. I stared at it, frozen. "You went through my things?" He sighed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Inside felt like time had stopped. Smiling faces at reception, the smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. He handed over papers, legal documents. A power of attorney transfer. My name. His signature. Done. I didn't cry then. Not yet. I let them take me to a room with beige walls, an adjustable bed, and a small window that faced a brick wall. My birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my coat, feeling the chill seep through my bones. No cake. No candles. Just silence. Hours passed. Eventually, I opened the bouquet. It had wilted during the car ride. The flowers looked the way I felt. That night, I stayed awake, listening to the soft murmur of the nurses, the distant sound of a television somewhere down the hall. The mattress was too firm. The sheets smelled of bleach. I replayed every conversation with Brandon over the past year, trying to spot the signs I had missed. I thought of all the times I said yes when I should have said no, the times I covered for him, lent him money, made excuses for him to others. The moments I swallowed my disappointment, because I loved him. But that night, I stopped defending him. Something broke inside me. Something essential. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She said my son had taken care of it. He deactivated the line. Said it was too confusing for me. That's when I realized, I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. And if I didn't find a way out, they would succeed. But I'm not as fragile as they think. Not even close. I stopped eating for 2 days. Not because I was making a statement, but because I simply couldn't digest the food, or the truth. There's something about being treated like you're no longer useful that breaks a part of you that never fully heals. I had raised a child. Built a home. Loved fiercely. And now, I was just a room number and a patient chart. The nurses were mostly kind, but kindness can feel like a form of pity when you're trapped. They called me honey and sweetie, like I was 10 or 100. No one asked what I used to do. No one asked what I loved. To them, I was just another old woman in slippers, forgetting things, even if I hadn't forgotten anything. My roommate, Doris. She slept all day and snored all night. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was about people who hadn't visited her in years. I listened because I knew too well the pain of absence. I tried to keep my mind sharp. I watched the news in the common room and did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway. I reread a novel I had already read twice before, but something inside me was sinking deeper, darker. Then, on the 4th day, I met Ruby. She wasn't supposed to work that day. A nurse had called in sick, and Ruby, young, with braids tucked beneath her uniform cap and kindness in her eyes, was the replacement. She was checking my vitals when she said, "You don't belong here." I looked at her, startled. She smiled. "Don't get me wrong. A lot of people need help and that's okay. But you don't seem lost." I blinked to push away the sudden sting in my eyes. We started talking. She asked about Brandon. I told her what I could without falling apart. She listened, not just nodded. She really listened. Later that day, she came back with something in her hand. "This belonged to Mr. Henley," she whispered, "a resident who passed away last week. We found it tucked inside a Bible. No one claimed it. It was a folded lottery ticket, slightly yellowed and dated 2 weeks earlier." I laughed, dry and brittle. "And you want me to try my luck?" She winked. "Hey, the world owes you something." I hadn't planned on doing it. Not at first. It seemed silly. But boredom and despair are strange bedfellows. That night, I waited until the hallway was silent. I used one of the old desktop computers in the lounge and typed in the numbers. My hand froze. My eyes scanned the page over and over. 10 million. I covered my mouth with both hands. I looked around, no one was there. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't joy I felt, not at all. It was fear. Pure, electric fear. If Brandon found out, if anyone found out. I printed the confirmation, folded it small, and tucked it into my bra. The next day, I pulled Ruby aside. "I need to speak to someone in private, someone legal." She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Ruby knew someone, a volunteer lawyer who came twice a month to help the elderly with wills and things like that. I waited, heart pounding, until he arrived that Friday. His name was Aaron Young, sharp, and most importantly, discreet. We sat in the small break room. I slid him the lottery confirmation and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows rose, but he didn't flinch. "We'll have to move fast," he said. The next few hours were a blur: paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, a temporary mailing address. He contacted an independent financial advisor who set up a blind trust. My name wasn't visible anywhere. Brandon would never see a cent. I signed a new will, leaving everything to an as-yet unnamed charity. Brandon had already signed my life away once. I wasn't going to let him do it again. Ruby hugged me the night I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I slipped out just before dawn, wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a bag with only the essentials. They thought I was senile, broken, alone, but I was about to become a ghost with 10 million. Let them look for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride out of Ohio was long, quiet, and cold. I sat near the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching that bag like it held my soul. In many ways, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was going. All I knew was I had to get far enough that no one could find me, not Brandon, not his wife, not the lawyers he had probably already called. Aaron had helped me purchase a modest house under a new trust name in rural Tennessee. Something off the grid but livable. No cameras, no neighbors too close, just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed the Kentucky border, I exhaled for the first time in hours. Freedom had a taste, and it wasn't sweet. It was metallic, like blood and fear. The house wasn't anything fancy, a single-story brick structure with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. But it had heat, clean water, and most importantly, silence. Not the kind you get in a nursing home, surrounded by people who have given up. This was the kind of silence that lets you breathe. The following days, I lived like a shadow. I cooked simple meals, walked to the mailbox, sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, watching the wind drag dead leaves across the yard. I checked the news obsessively, half expecting to see my name in bold letters. Missing woman wins 10 million. Son claims mental instability, but nothing appeared. I still hadn't put the lottery ticket in the fireproof box beneath the floorboards, in the hallway closet. Next to it, I kept the new will, a disposable phone, and a note addressed to whoever might find this, just in case. One morning, about a week after I had left Willow Pines, the quiet was broken by a knock at the door. I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I didn't even have a credit card linked to my name. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. I tiptoed to the window and peeked out. Just a delivery man, groceries, part of the arrangement Aaron had set up. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake Facebook profile and looked up Brandon. There he was, smiling in his profile picture as if the world hadn't fallen apart. In his latest post, he wrote, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She has been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Underneath, hundreds of comments, prayers, condolences, people praising Brandon for being such a good son. I laughed so hard I cried. Oh, he had no idea. None. But what really broke me wasn't the post. It was the photo he used. It wasn't recent. It was from 5 years ago, one of the last birthdays we had celebrated together. I was wearing a shiny party hat, and he had his arm around me. We looked happy. How easy it is to fake love in photographs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the fireplace. My thoughts circled endlessly, and the longer I sat with them, the darker they became. I remembered every time I had given Brandon money, every loan, every lie. I remembered how he manipulated me, subtly, but just enough. He'd say things like, "You already told me that," when I hadn't, or, "You're forgetting more and more these days." I thought I was aging poorly. I thought it was my fault. It wasn't. He wanted me to doubt myself so that when he took control of my life, I wouldn't resist. Well, I was done being controlled. The next morning, I called Aaron from a disposable number. "I need you to update my will again," I said. He didn't ask why. "What changes?" "I want to make it very clear, Brandon Taylor gets absolutely nothing. Not $1. Not a keepsake. Not a memory." "Done," he said. "You're safe now, Margaret." But I wasn't. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew something was coming. And I needed to be ready for it. It started with a letter, plain, no return address, hidden among utility bills and junk mail. I wouldn't have noticed it if it weren't for the heavier than usual paper. Expensive. My stomach twisted the moment I touched it. Inside was a single sheet, a photocopy. My signature, or what appeared to be it, below 2 others, one from my late husband, Richard, and the other from Brandon. It was a personal loan document dated 12 years ago, $20,000 taken out in the name of Richard and myself. The bank logo was real. So was the notary seal. But I had never signed that paper. Never. I sat on the worn couch, the letter trembling in my hands. The document bore my handwriting perfectly, down to the loop in the G of Margaret. But something about it was off. Too clean. Too practiced. My husband would never have hidden a loan like that. And Brandon, he never said a word. I pulled out the fireproof box, retrieved the oldest file folder Aaron had helped me compile, a collection of past financial documents we'd salvaged before I left. Inside, I found 3 more forms, all with my forged signature. A cold understanding slid through me. Brandon had been stealing from Richard and me for years. It explained the strange tension in our final years together, the way Richard avoided certain financial topics, how suddenly we had less, how Brandon always seemed to need money for an emergency yet drove a newer car every year. The silent arguments at night I thought were about work. The cancelled vacation plans. The bad investments. I had blamed aging, the market, a general turn of luck. But it was Brandon all along. I didn't cry this time. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. For the next 3 days, I pieced it all together. Brandon had forged several loan documents using Richard's and my social security numbers. The amounts varied, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Some had been paid off. Others had quietly been sent to collections. Richard must have covered most before he died, carrying the shame with him. But one account was still active, showing a growing balance of over $25,000, and it had defaulted under my name just 3 months before I was left at Willow Pines. I sat in the darkness of that small Tennessee living room, the screen glowing in front of me, hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, fraud, a crime. I contacted Aaron again. I have new information, I told him. Forged documents. Loans. Brandon did it. He didn't say, "I don't believe you." He said calmly, "Do you want to press charges?" Not yet. I wasn't ready. Not because I had doubts, those were long gone. I wasn't ready because I wanted him to feel the fear first. The silence. The not knowing. I wanted him to wonder if I knew. Because the truth was, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I started gathering every document I could, every account linked to my name, every old email, every financial notice Brandon had ever sent in my name. I even contacted the old bank we used and requested records under a legal pretext Aaron helped me draft. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed. And what it revealed made my blood run cold. Brandon had taken a high-interest loan against the small business I once co-founded with Richard back in the 80s, a catering venture we ran from our garage in those early years. He used that LLC, still technically active, to secure a $100,000 line of credit. He signed it using Richard's name, 2 years after Richard had died. That wasn't just a moral failure. That was federal fraud. I saved everything in an encrypted folder, backed it up, and printed a copy to store in the box beneath the floorboards. I didn't know how much time I had, because if Brandon was as desperate as I suspected, and if he had even the faintest clue that I had disappeared with millions, he would come for me soon. Have you ever looked at someone you've loved your whole life and realized you never really knew them? That's what it felt like, scrolling through pages of documents tying my son to a trail of deceit so long and tangled it made my stomach churn. The man I once rocked to sleep in my arms had become a stranger. And not just any stranger, a dangerous one. By now, I had confirmed everything. Brandon had forged my signature, lied to banks, manipulated my late husband into covering for him, and worst of all, he had done it all wearing the mask of a devoted son. But the darkest truth came through a simple search buried in a public database. With a little help from Aaron's access, I found it. Brandon Taylor, currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, embezzlement, and identity misuse. Identity misuse. That was the one that hit me hardest. I clicked on the case file, hands trembling. The details were mostly redacted, but the charges were clear. Brandon had been creating fake identities, inflating incomes, forging deductions, and filing returns to divert money through refunds. Some of those identities belonged to deceased individuals. Some were elderly. Some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged multiple returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. I stared at the screen, my mind spiraling. He had planned to take my money from the start. Was this why he was so quick to put me in a facility and disconnect my phone? It wasn't concern. It was containment. He wanted to keep me silent, disoriented, and out of the way. I stepped away from the desk, pacing the narrow living room, one hand on my chest to steady the trembling. My own son had used my identity as a weapon. He used my name as a tool for his schemes. And when the heat came down, he had planned to discard me like a loose end in a messy story. Only now, I wasn't just a loose end. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every lie. Every loan. Every forged line on a piece of paper. I printed them, filed them in manila folders, labeled them with dates. I started recording audio notes, not because I was afraid of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the last one in the room if anything happened to me. Then I made a decision. I mailed a copy of the entire file, anonymously, to the Department of Justice. Not to make a statement. Not yet. But to plant a seed. They would have the evidence. If anything ever happened to me, they would know where to look. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew. I started noticing cars parked longer than usual near the house. Once, a man knocked on the door claiming he was conducting a neighborhood survey. I didn't open. I just watched from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, every doorbell made me jump. And still, I didn't run. Not this time. I made another call to Aaron. We need to finalize the trust, I said. The will, too. I want everything protected. He agreed. We set it all up under my new name, with layers of legal insulation. If Brandon ever tried to claim assets, he'd be thrown out of every court in the country. But no matter how much I tried to protect myself with paper and strategy, the emotional blow came in the quietest moments. I would sit at night and remember Brandon as a child, his laughter, his scraped knees. The way he used to fall asleep on my chest. I remembered the teenage years when things got harder, but I never gave up on him. The calls from college, the sudden silences, the growing distance, how I overlooked it. How long he had been pulling away while I kept holding on. Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal, the one you see unfolding in slow motion, always hoping it's something else. But now I knew, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite the ending of my story. Because for the first time in my life, I held the pen. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. But the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. Brandon had always written with sharp, slanted strokes, like even his pen couldn't wait to finish whatever it was doing. Inside, there was a single sentence: I know what you did, and this isn't over. I read it twice. 3 times. Then I laughed, not with amusement, but because it was exactly the kind of arrogance I expected from him. Not an, I miss you. Not a, where are you? Just a warning, or a threat. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into my growing evidence folder. By then, I had been gone nearly 3 weeks. Brandon had launched what looked like a full-blown public campaign of concern, pleading for information, giving interviews to local news stations, playing the role of the heartbroken son searching for his confused, vulnerable mother. It would have been comical if it weren't so chilling. And then, just as I feared, he made his move. A letter arrived from the county courthouse in Dayton. Certified. I signed it with trembling hands and sat down to open it at the kitchen table. He had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incompetent. I couldn't breathe. The document included statements from 2 people who claimed I had displayed erratic and confused behavior over the past year. One was a former neighbor. The other, a college friend of his, someone I barely knew. Brandon's lawyer had also submitted audio clips, fragments of old voicemail messages I had left when I was distressed, alone, or just venting. Spliced and edited, they made me sound sick. Unstable. He even included a letter from a psychiatrist, one I had never met, expressing concern over my disappearance and alleged paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my accounts, take control of the trust, drag me back. It felt like the air had been ripped from my lungs. Aaron came that very night. He read everything, his expression unreadable. "We've got work to do," he said finally. "But Margaret, you need to stay calm. You need to stay sharp. They're counting on panic." I was too numb to cry. The next few days passed like a storm. Aaron contacted an experienced litigator to help us prepare. We gathered documents, video calls, financial records, even a dated journal to prove I had been of sound mind every single day since I left. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Levin, came to the house and spent 3 hours with me. She asked about my childhood, my late husband, Brandon. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She listened. Asked real questions. And when she left, she touched my hand and said, "You are the most lucid person I've seen all week." It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in days. Still, the pressure mounted. News of the hearing leaked. The internet, which had briefly sympathized with Brandon's missing mother saga, began to shift. Why hadn't I contacted anyone? Was I unstable? Someone else must be pulling the strings. The media loves a mystery. And Brandon knew exactly how to feed them one. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now I had more than evidence, I had a purpose. In the quiet of my small home, I began preparing a video statement. I didn't release it, not yet. But I wanted to be ready, in case they tried to silence me. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted the most." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply told the truth. Because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed since the last time I'd been there, years ago, when I paid a parking ticket and sat in a room full of people hoping to forget their mistakes. Back then, I was a wife. A mother. Someone who believed in giving people second chances. Now, I was the accused. Aaron had advised me to dress simply but with strength, something that said, "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to be heard." I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and a pair of sensible heels that echoed defiantly with each step down the courthouse hallways. Brandon was already seated at the front of the courtroom when I arrived. He stood as I entered, as if staging the perfect performance, a mask of concern covering his face. He even offered a smile, the kind strangers would interpret as warmth. But I saw it for what it was. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, introduced the case. In the matter of the mental competency of Margaret Taylor, the words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's lawyer went first, a tall man with a polished voice and far too much confidence. He laid it out like a script. Margaret had disappeared. Margaret was behaving erratically. Margaret was possibly being manipulated. Margaret was a danger to herself and her finances. He submitted the psychiatrist's letter, the one from a doctor I had never met, and presented those audio clips of me, edited and stitched together like a horror film. I listened to myself sound scattered, desperate, even unstable, completely out of context. I saw the judge's eyebrows lift. My hands gripped the armrest. Then Brandon spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling just enough, "I truly love my mother. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost." That's when I stood. My turn. "Your Honor," the judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing just long enough to let the weight of my presence settle. Then I spoke. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I'm 62 years old. I am not mentally incompetent. I am not lost. And I am not anyone's victim." I opened my folder methodically, carefully, and handed a copy of Dr. Levin's full psychiatric report to the judge, signed, dated, and certified. The verdict: completely sound mind. No indicators of cognitive decline. Emotionally stable. I watched the lawyer's shoulders stiffen. Brandon's face tensed. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, lifting a second folder, "a record of every phone call I made the week before I left. Receipts of the funds transferred into a legal trust. clean medical records, and a sworn affidavit from the attorney who helped me leave the facility, stating that I was lucid, logical, and fully in control of my decisions. I paused. And I have something else. But I won't present it today, unless I need to. I didn't show the file. The one with every forged signature, every stolen loan, every manipulated tax document Brandon ever touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent. He took my phone. He took my freedom. And now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom was still. Aaron sat beside me, silent but firm. His eyes met mine, proud, but not surprised. The judge leaned back, his thumb tapping the file. I need time to review all the documents and the medical evaluation. The court will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Brandon turned toward me as the session ended. He tried to catch my gaze, but I didn't give him that satisfaction. He left the courtroom with clenched fists and a tight jaw. His mask was cracking. And I walked out with my head held high. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I could win it. 2 weeks. That's the time the judge gave us. But Brandon didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he doubled down on his public campaign. Local news aired a news segment, "Missing Mother Reappears in Court, Son Fears Exploitation." Brandon spoke directly to the camera, eyes glistening, voice trembling just enough. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe," he said. "She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly. And I fear there are people around her with bad intentions." I watched the broadcast from my living room, arms crossed, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me. Just me. Just Margaret Taylor, the woman who raised him, who sacrificed, who forgave more than any mother ever should. And he had the audacity to paint me as a puppet. That was the moment I knew that the quiet war I had declared in my heart was no longer enough. I needed to act. I called Aaron and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I handed him the sealed envelope, with every document I had gathered, the fraudulent loans, the forged signatures, the tax filings Brandon had submitted in my name. "Send it," I said. "Not to the court. To the Department of Justice. Anonymously." He opened the envelope, flipped through the pages, and nodded. This will get their attention. I'm counting on it." But I wasn't finished. That night, using one of my new aliases and a fresh online account, I made a sizable donation, $5 million, to a national nonprofit that protects the elderly from financial abuse. No name attached. Just the transfer. Within a week, they launched a campaign using my case as a symbol. They didn't name me, but the timing was too perfect. People began to whisper. To share. To question. How does a mother disappear, then reappear with money, only for her own son to try to lock her away? The comments flooded social media. Something's wrong with the son. Let her speak. Why hasn't anyone asked for her side of the story? I don't trust him. The carefully constructed image of Brandon began to crumble. Then came an unexpected break. A journalist from a major newspaper contacted Aaron. She wanted to hear my side of the story. She promised discretion, no names, no photos, just the truth. I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe 2 towns away. I wore sunglasses and a hat. We sat in the corner booth. She turned on the recorder and let me talk. I told her about the facility, about being dropped off there without warning, about Brandon taking my phone, my accounts, my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery, not yet. When she asked about the court case, I simply said, "He's trying to take control of my life again." The story was published 2 days later, Mother or Millionaire? The silencing of Margaret T. It didn't take long for the dots to be connected. People online began to speculate, was the missing mother really the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? More whispers. More doubt. And I still remained silent. Because Brandon's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from a reckoning. 2 days before the court reconvened, Aaron received a call. It was from the Department of Justice. They had received our anonymous file and were opening a case. Brandon didn't know yet. But while he was building a castle of lies in courtrooms and cameras, I was setting fire to the foundation, and the flames were rising. The second hearing felt colder. Not because of the weather, though the Tennessee wind had turned cruel that week, but because something had shifted in the air around us. Brandon entered the courtroom looking less confident this time. His shoulders weren't as high. His lawyer whispered urgently as they took their seats. They had seen the article. They had seen the shift online. They were feeling the cracks. I sat quietly, my folder of documents neatly placed on my lap. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that sharpens with precision. This time, we went first. Aaron opened with a statement that silenced the room. Your Honor, he began, since the last hearing, we have completed a full independent psychiatric evaluation, presented detailed financial records proving Mrs. Taylor's independence and coherence, and have uncovered through legitimate public records that the petitioner, Mr. Brandon Taylor, is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity theft and tax fraud. He handed the judge a copy of the public case file. Brandon's lawyer immediately stood, protesting. That investigation has no bearing. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. The courtroom held its breath. Then came the real blow. Dr. Levin, my independent evaluator, took the stand, calm, sharp, direct. She confirmed that not only was I mentally competent, but emotionally stable and fully aware of my decisions, including my choice to leave the facility. She is not just lucid, said Dr. Levin. She is deliberate. Thoughtful. There is no medical basis for any claim of incompetence. I looked at Brandon then. His hands were gripping the table so tightly, his knuckles were white. His mask, that carefully constructed facade of concern, was unraveling by the second. Aaron then presented our final evidence. A timeline showed exactly when Brandon attempted to take control of my accounts and how it matched perfectly with large withdrawals he made from his own failing business. Coincidence? Hardly. The judge reviewed everything silently. Brandon was given the chance to respond. He stood. His voice cracked. My mother is sick. Clearly she's being manipulated by someone. She wouldn't act like this unless she was confused or unstable. This isn't her. I stood then and faced him directly. I am her, I told him. Everyone went quiet. I'm the woman who stayed up with you when you had the flu at 6 years old. Who gave up vacations? Who pawned jewelry to pay for your college classes? Who cooked your favorite meal even when I couldn't afford groceries for myself? I'm her. And you left me in a facility like I was nothing. I turned to the judge. And now, Your Honor, I ask that you let me prove I'm not nothing. The judge leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and spoke slowly. Mrs. Taylor, based on the overwhelming evidence provided, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, I am dismissing this case. Your financial accounts and personal autonomy are fully restored. This court recognizes you as competent and independent. I didn't cry. But my hands trembled slightly as I gathered my papers and walked out of the courtroom. Brandon didn't say a word as I walked past him. His eyes were wild, not with anger, but with fear. He knew it was over. At least this part. But what he didn't know was that while he had spent weeks trying to prove I was unstable, I had been building something far more powerful than a defense, a legacy. And I wasn't finished yet. The phone call came just after midnight. Aaron's voice was tense but steady. It happened. DOJ has opened formal proceedings. Brandon's name is on the record. I didn't speak. I just sat there in the dark, watching the wind move the trees beyond my window. Part of me had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had come, it didn't feel like victory. It felt inevitable. The next morning, the world caught up. The media swirled. At first, Brandon Taylor, son in the recent elder abuse case, under federal investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, not directly, but the dots were far too close not to connect. People remembered the missing mother, the court battle, the anonymous donor, the fragile woman who vanished, then stood her ground in court. Weeks later, now the perfect sun was unraveling, and they wanted to hear from me. I stayed silent for 2 days. I turned off the television, ignored the phone, made myself breakfast, watched birds pecking at the frosted garden, sat with a pen in hand and wrote letters I never intended to send. But silence wasn't justice. It was time. I reached out to Sarah, the journalist who had met me in secret weeks earlier. I told her I was ready to speak, this time on camera. No aliases. No more shadows. We scheduled the interview for the following Friday. National news. Full feature. She asked if I was sure. I've never been more sure, I said. On the day of the interview, I dressed simply, gray sweater, small silver earrings. No makeup. No stylist. Just truth. We sat across from each other in a quiet studio, the lights soft and warm. Sarah leaned forward. Margaret, the world knows the headlines. They've read about Brandon, about the case. But what they don't know is the heart of this. Why now? I looked directly at the camera. Because it's not just about me, I said. It's about every parent who gave everything and was discarded. Every elderly person erased, locked away under the pretense of love. I was almost one of them. And I won't stay silent anymore. Then I told my story. The facility. The lottery ticket. The lies I uncovered. The file I sent. I left nothing out. Sarah's eyes welled with tears as I spoke, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. That night, the interview aired. Millions watched. Messages flooded in. People from all over the country shared their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. I wasn't just Margaret anymore, I was a mirror. Brandon didn't speak publicly. But sources close to him said he was devastated. His life was falling apart. Good. He built that life on manipulation, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I got to work. I made plans to launch a foundation, one that would protect seniors from legal and financial abuse. Not just in name, but with real legal support, real funding, real advocacy. I called it the Margaret Project. Because if they were going to use my name to strip me of dignity, I would use it to give it back. Still, the pain lingered. Not because Brandon was suffering, but because I had once loved him with a kind of loyalty that blinded me. And now I had to learn to live without that illusion. But I had something better now. I had the truth. And no one could take that from me again. Brandon's arrest didn't come with sirens. It came with headlines. Brandon Taylor charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the news on a quiet morning, tea in hand, my cat curled beside me. The house was still, except for the steady hum of the fridge and the wind brushing the blinds. For a long time, I just stared at the article. Not because I didn't believe it, I did. But because I had imagined this moment so many times that when it finally arrived, it almost felt like a slide into place. He was out on bail, of course. Money can buy time, even when it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name had become synonymous with betrayal. Former clients withdrew business. His credit lines were frozen. Friends vanished. Even his wife had issued a statement through an attorney. She was filing for divorce. Now he was alone. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was emptiness. The thing about surviving betrayal is that it doesn't leave you whole. It leaves you wiser, yes. Sharper. Stronger, maybe. But something soft dies in you, that blind trust, that belief that love is enough to keep someone loyal. I didn't cry. I buried that softness. It was a cold Saturday when I walked into town for the first time since the interview aired. People recognized me. They didn't whisper. They didn't stare. They smiled. A woman, maybe in her 40s, touched my arm and said, "You gave my mother the courage to leave a bad situation." A young man behind the pharmacy counter slipped a note into my prescription bag. "My grandma says thank you." I hadn't sought that kind of attention, but it came gently, like sunlight through heavy clouds. Aaron stopped by that afternoon. They offered him a deal, he said. 10 years if he pleads guilty. If not, it goes to trial. And him? I asked. Still pretending it's all just a misunderstanding? He thinks he can outsmart the system. I shook my head. He's been pretending his whole life. Aaron hesitated. He still hasn't tried to contact you? I met his eyes. Not directly. But I had received something, a letter. Unmarked envelope, slid under my front door one night while I was in the kitchen. Inside, a photograph. It was from my 7th birthday. Me, in a yellow sweater, laughing with cake on my face. Brandon beside me, holding the knife, laughing too. On the back, just one line in his handwriting, "You always believed in me." I'm sorry that wasn't enough. I sat with that photo for hours. No tears. No rage. Just remembering. Remembering the little boy who asked for one more bedtime story. The teenager who crashed my car into a mailbox and cried when I didn't yell. The man who hugged me tighter than usual the day his father died. They were all parts of him. And I loved them. But love, real love, requires truth. And Brandon chose lies. That night, I burned the photo in the fireplace. Not out of hate, out of release. I watched the flames curl around the paper, blackening the edges, erasing the smile. I didn't need a picture to remember. I needed peace. And I was almost there. The morning I returned to Willow Pines, the sky was a pale gray, the kind that softens the world without hiding it. I stood outside the facility for a long moment, staring at the same place where I'd once been dropped off like luggage. The parking lot was quiet. The trees were bare. But something had changed. The front doors opened, and Ruby came out before I could knock. She gasped when she saw me. "Oh my God, Margaret." I smiled. "It's me." We hugged, not politely, not briefly, but like two people who had survived something. Her arms were warm, and I realized how long it had been since I'd felt safe in someone's embrace. Inside, the place looked different. The floors were freshly waxed. The lights were brighter. The common room had new books, a better TV, and real coffee brewing in the corner. "I heard what you did," Ruby said, guiding me to a quiet bench in the hallway. "The donations. The interviews. Margaret, you changed everything." I didn't say anything. I had simply stopped letting people decide who I was. We walked the halls together. I visited Doris's old room, now a reading lounge. Staff looked up, some smiling, others stunned. A few residents recognized me. I nodded to each of them. They weren't invisible anymore. And neither was I. That afternoon, I gave a speech in the new activity room. They had set up folding chairs. The staff had baked cookies. Ruby introduced me like I was someone famous. But I shook my head. "I'm not here because I'm rich," I began. "And I'm not here because I was hurt. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way." Every pair of eyes watched me. Some filled with tears. "I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago," I said. "You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished." The applause followed, soft at first, then stronger. I smiled, feeling the weight of every lonely night I'd endured now replaced by something warmer, something whole. When I returned home, I finalized the trust. The Margaret Project would become a national organization offering legal and financial advocacy for seniors at risk of exploitation. We would hire lawyers. Launch hotlines. Build partnerships with senior care facilities and courts. Brandon? He took the deal. 10 years. He tried to send another letter. I returned it unopened. That chapter was closed. I spent the final days of the year writing letters to everyone who had helped me, Aaron, Ruby, even Dr. Levin. I thanked them, not for saving me, but for standing beside me while I saved myself. And then, during the first snowfall of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself. It was short, just 1 page. I read it aloud as I sat by the fireplace, my cat curled at my feet. Dear Margaret. You weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved too deeply. And when they tried to erase you from your own life, you took the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I'm so proud of you. With love. Yourself. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel. I didn't need a legacy of money, revenge, or even justice. I had something greater, freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was finally, completely free. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.